All right. Welcome, everybody. We're going to get going on our final Road to Residency webinar for this season. I am Dr. Sarah Eichmeyer. I'll be your facilitator this evening. As a way of introduction, I am the chair of PM&R at University of Kansas and very involved in medical student education. I'm going to go around my chat room and I'll have each of our panelists introduce themselves, name and where you're from and what your role is in medical education, and then we'll get going on our questions about the interview process. Dr. Rupert, you're up first.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm Dr. Lisa Rupert. I'm the Fellowship Program Director of a Cancer Rehabilitation Medicine Fellowship at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. I also happen to be part of the core faculty for the New York Presbyterian residency program, the combined Columbia Cornell program. So welcome, everyone. It's nice to see you all tonight.
Great. Dr. Williams.
Hello, my name is Maida Williams. I'm a PGY4 at the University of Minnesota with Dr. Tonkin. I'm originally from Madison, Wisconsin. I think that's the relevant info.
Great, thank you. Dr. Lamb.
Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Adam Lamb. I'm the program director at Mary Free in Grand Rapids and also serve as the division chief at Michigan State College of Human Medicine.
Wonderful. All right, Dr. Boyces.
Hi everyone, I'm Lucila Busis. I'm a PGY3 at Mount Sinai, New York.
And Dr. Hall.
Hi everyone, I'm Aria Hall. I am a PGY3 at UPMC.
Great. Dr. Tonkin.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm Brian Tonkin. I'm a former program director, current associate program director, and vice chair of education at the University of Minnesota, and division chief of PM&R at the Minneapolis VA.
Wonderful. Dr. Kibelhan.
Hi everyone, my name is Emily Kiblehan. I am the program director of Shirley Ryan's combined pediatrics PM&R residency program that we do alongside with Larry Children's, and I'm also an APD for our core PM&R residency program here at Shirley Ryan.
Great. Dr. Ma.
Hi, I'm Marina Ma. I'm a Peds physiatrist. I am the Peds Rehab Fellowship Program Director at Baylor College of Medicine, and I do both palliative care and Peds Rehab here.
Okay. And Dr. Chowdhury.
Hi everyone, I'm Harris Chaudhry. I'm the residency program director at Burke Rehab in the New York City suburbs.
All right. Well, thank you to all of our panelists for being here tonight. So what we'll do is we'll jump into the questions that have been submitted by students interested in applying to PM&R, and we're talking tonight about preparing for your interview and the interview process. As a reminder, you can put questions directly in the chat during the webinar, and our panelists will kind of alternate between answering the questions and just taking a peek at the chat if they have questions, if they can answer things for you there as well. So we'll jump off with kind of a big generic question. So how should one practice for an interview?
I can start with this one. Or do you want to start, Dr. Chowdhury? Okay. I guess very broadly, first of all, like you should know where you're interviewing. So, and about the program. So you should try to, search on the website, any like general information about the program, an overview of like how many residents they take, their curriculum, anything that they have on the website, you should familiarize yourself with it. Just because it can like help you come up with questions for the interviewers. It'll help you like just prepare for maybe questions they're going to ask you. It also, I think, specifically prepare you for the question that's like why you want to come to that program. So it's really important to get familiar with where you're going to be interviewing at. And then otherwise, I would recommend just like looking up like generic interview questions and making sure that you know the answer to like the big questions like why you want to do PM&R, tell me about yourself, let's see, why you want to come here, and then otherwise like more generic questions like your strengths, your weaknesses, and then know your application really well because they can always ask you about those things. That's a very broad answer. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would just add, I think it's helpful if you're practicing to record yourself so you can go back and kind of see how you did and almost critique yourself and see where you stuttered or struggled. That can be helpful for some people.
I also think good practice is really know your CV, know what you put on it, and be ready to speak to the things that are actually there. And that could be anything from a presentation you gave to research that you said you were a part of, because those are all going to be fair game during your interviews. And you really want to make sure that you know that CV and that personal statement well.
So, for the program directors, what does a typical virtual interview schedule look like? How long are the interviews? How do you structure your interview days?
I think it really varies. I think, for our core program, there can be pretty big gaps of time. And I know for other people, they ha just have one after another after another. So I think it can definitely take a little bit of endurance. I think on those days, kind of remembering that the other person on the other side of the interview might also be kind of working through that endurance of talking to a lot of different people and really making an effort to get to know them. And so I think, having a lot of questions prepared and making sure that you can keep the interview going if you need to, hopefully you're with a skilled interviewer, but they will at some point transition to, an opportunity for you to ask questions because we want you all to have the opportunity to know the program. But I find sometimes after that, it can kind of get into a lull. So I think it's good for you to have additional questions that would be nice to ask the interviewers.
I would agree. I think overall you're going to find a lot of different variations on the mornings or the afternoons or the days. For us, we have 8 20-minute sessions. 6 of those are interviews. One of them is a time to just chat with the residents, and another one is a break for you to, feed your dog or go to the bathroom or take a nap, whatever you feel like you can fit in 20 minutes there.
I can speak for New York Presbyterian. Obviously, we do a memorial. We do more of the fellowship interviews, so a little bit different. But NYP does have a morning session and an afternoon session, and it is pretty much back to back, about 20 minutes each per interview. And there will be, again, similar to what Dr. Tonkin said, there'll be time to speak with the residents, speak with the program coordinator, and there'll be some little gaps, but be prepared for a lot of back-to-back if they're a program that you're interviewing with. But I think in general, I would be prepared, have everything you need fairly close by, because you may not have too many opportunities to get up and get things. So if you want water or coffee or you need that candy to keep you going, make sure that it's kind of all within the arm's reach.
Yeah, just on a different side of it, it can also be important to notice like who you don't get to interview with, like if they don't let you talk to the residents or program leadership or things like that. So sometimes that's almost pretty important to note also. So just be on the lookout when you're interviewing.
One other thing to look at, and I know that since a lot of programs are doing virtual, some programs will have resident happy hours or like an opportunity to sign on the night before, and kind of in a more informal, virtual environment as much as you can make that, have an opportunity to talk to the residents and look through different like videos or information about the program. Some people take the opportunity, some don't. At the end of the day, the residents who are on those, resident meet and greets will tell us who actually showed up and who didn't. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to show up for the one right before your interview. It could be another one, that they'll let you know of that is happening, but consider attending those as well, because, the program directors do care if you've gone or not.
Okay. Dr. Busis started us off, but what are some other common or typical questions that every medical student should have an answer for?
I
Would
think
be prepared. Oops, sorry. I would be prepared to back up your hobbies. If you are like interested in languages, like I've had people ask me to speak the languages that I have listed on my resume. I have an attending that asked somebody to sing for them because singing was a hobby. I don't say that to scare you, but like just know that anything on your application is really fair game and you might have to kind of prove it a little bit. But I think that the hobbies are really great. Like, don't disregard those because that's a really good test of fit. If someone's like, oh God, you're not going to have time for this, like, I would be a little skeptical. But I think you can get a good vibe of the people that you're talking to in a program by weaving your hobbies and life outside of medicine into the conversation.
I would also add that I would have a couple of patient anecdotes ready to go, whether that is a challenging patient encounter you had, a meaningful patient encounter you had while you're on, if you're doing aways, or even while you're on your rotations right now, depending on what year you are. It's not a bad idea to write them down. I found myself having to like go back and really think about some of my patient encounters. So if you had something that was really meaningful or challenging for you, just jot it somewhere that you can reference to again, because I think I got asked that pretty regularly. And, hats off to you if it's also PM&R related.
Dr. Ma, you have your hand up.
Um, I think I usually kind of try to group it as like a general question, like it would be like who you are as a person, your interests outside of medicine, what matters to you. And then I think some would ask about career, like why do you choose PM&R? Why this program? Why specifically are you looking at our program? And then there's the behavioral question of like, how do you respond when things don't go well? I think that's where the patient anecdotes would be helpful. How you work in a team, because PM&R is very much a team based specialty. And then I think kind of like a career question, like future question, like where are you going? Where do you want to do with PM&R? Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? And I don't think you have to have an answer, but some sort of an idea that could tell us who you are as a person and whether we want to work with you or not.
I echo all of those. Also, be ready to speak about the uncomfortable. You may be asked about mistakes that you've made. I don't think anyone is trying to judge you because we all make mistakes, but I think they're trying to see what you do in that situation and how you learn from things. There are some who will still ask you about your strengths and weaknesses. And so, as much as we don't want to talk about our negatives, they may come up in your interview, depending on who's interviewing you. And I would also say know your environment. I have recently heard about some attendings asking about pictures that are on the wall behind you or something you're sitting near. Know what it is, whether you liked it or not, or, does it have some kind of meaning? Because a lot of interviewers will also want to see how you are with the questions that are really unscripted. So those that you're not prepared to answer, and those that you're answering on the spot because they really want to see how you handle that and also the kind of conversation that you're able to have about those things.
So somebody brought up the question, why PM&R? I can guarantee you will be asked that question. So what are some important components when you're answering that question? Why PM&R?
I don't know if it's, you don't have to listen to this. I just advise take it or leave it. Know your audience you're talking to. You might be 100% pain medicine, but you're probably talking to a lot of inpatient rehab program directors. And if you don't show an understanding of the breadth of PM&R or that a large part of your training will be inpatient rehab, it's probably not going to work in your favor. So take that or leave it, and maybe you don't want to end up with a program that doesn't, say that thing, but that's just advice that you should probably understand your audience you're talking to.
Yeah, I would emphasize that. And I think I saw a couple other program leaders smiling at that. And, I do a lot of inpatient peds and I interview people who are clearly going for pain all the time. And that's great. That's okay. But you're going to go into a program that probably has a really broad exposure. And we want to make sure that you want to learn all of those aspects to help yourself be a better, whatever ultimate subspecialist or generalist you want to become. And so I think that that question can be a great opportunity to show off what you know about PM&R and your clinical experiences because they're really variable. And you guys are on this meeting, so obviously you're doing your homework. And so I think really show off all of the things that you know about PM&R because I think programs want to make sure that these applicants really know what they're getting into and have seen all the various sides that they're not going to be miserable during their inpatient rotations or miserable during their outpatient rotations, and that you're the kind of person who wants this broad specialty.
I think along the same lines, we don't expect you to know every detail of what PM&R is. That is, part of what you will learn in residency, but as it's kind of been said, have a good understanding, what it is that we do both on the inpatient and the outpatient side, the kind of patients that you're going to care for. If you have anecdotes, that's great. But really to understand at its basic what PM&R is always helpful. You don't want to just come in and be like, like people said, about pain or, it's because I love knee pain and that's why I want to do it. But really have a good understanding of what we bring to the table as physiatrists.
Yeah, I kind of look at this question a little bit deeper as well of like this is an opportunity for you to kind of explain your aptitude and your own kind of personal goals and who you are and how you as a person and you professionally align with PM&R. And I think that that's one of the things that I know that I look for. I know a lot of the my interview panel look for as well. And so it's because I think it's that same risk that you sometimes see on personal statements of, well, I like PM&R because I like working with people with disabilities and I'm excited about getting to do procedures. And it's almost like you kind of explain the field. I think what is really important is to like why you in PM&R? What is it about you and who you are and who you want to be that fits with the field? So I would echo everything and add that.
I would also emphasize, and other folks can negate this if this wasn't their experience, but I was asked this question in every single one of my interviews. So I would have by somebody, and you get interviewed by multiple people. So I would have your answer fleshed out before, practice it, talk to yourself in the mirror, write it down, talk to your best friend, whomever, but like know this well. And so that it's not rehearsed, like you actually, have the feeling behind it when you say it so that it seems believable. So I would just emphasize that emphatically that you should make sure that you have a solid answer to this question.
Kind of like that moment of how are you going to explain this to a patient one day? Or how are you going to explain it to your parents, what it is that you do? Be able to have that kind of answer and be able to speak that passionately about it.
I agree with Dr. Roop. I think that when you are really into anything, it really is reflected in the way that you talk about it. And people can really pick up on when you're excited about something. And so I would either like hold a memory, a patient encounter, an experience that you had in your mind and kind of use that to drive that answer. Because I think that this sounds so cheesy, but like when it comes from like experience and the heart, like it's just so obvious, I think, and that makes a like kind of meh answer a great answer and makes people feel like, oh yeah, they know why they're doing this. Like this is not just they chose a specialty, like they kind of chose a career and a vocation and they found their calling more so than anything.
Absolutely. You're going to be doing this job a long time. You better understand why you're doing it, right? Okay. Somebody brought up questions that at the end of the interview. So for the panel, what are questions that are good or maybe not so good to ask? What are the types of questions that people who are interviewing you want to hear?
I think personally, for questions that I think you should not ask are things that you could easily find on like the website, or you could easily like message a resident about after your interview. Like if you're, I think you should use the interview time to try to ask questions that you aren't going to get like an easy answer for somewhere else. Maybe trying to learn more about the person that's interviewing you, getting a vibe of how they are as a person, as a teacher, as a mentor, whatever it is. But I personally think you shouldn't be using that time to like get a quick, like easy answer for something.
Dr. Ma?
That tells me that the resident or the prospective student is really interested would be like, what happens if a resident is struggling? How do you help that resident? How do you, like if what does the autonomy look like from a PGY2 to PGY3, PGY4? What does mentorship feel like? What if they don't know? What if they're struggling, or what if they don't know what they want to pursue? How do you then develop this resident to be, the best version of themselves? I think it's also like looking at the resident as a person holistically, not just, like a learner. And then I think also when you also need to tailor the questions to the person that you're seeing. Like for the resident, ask them, how do you enjoy training here? What do you not like about it? What do you think when can you if you think that there's a change that you want to implement to the program, how receptive is the program? I think I agree with I think Dr. Buses who said, like ask the questions that you're not going to find in the website, because that tells me that they're really interested in the program and they're thinking about the program that they want to go to.
This is a big know your audience. You probably don't want to be asking questions about the call schedule, the vacation schedule, things that make it sound like you don't really want to work. Those are things that, program coordinators will fill you in on and you can find fairly easily. Probably not the time, but know who you're speaking to. So for me, when potential residents interview, I'm at an offsite. So I'm at Sloan Kettering. I'm not at New York Presbyterian itself. Ask about the rotation that happens at Sloan when you spend time there. What kind of opportunities? Do that for all the different programs anywhere. Ask about rotations that you may have. Are they all within, the four walls of the hospital, or do you go outside? When you do go outside, what kind of things are you seeing? What kind of patients will you see? Ask about potential, research opportunities or different kind of projects you may be able to work on. So really kind of getting a good sense of really getting to know the people that you're interviewing with and kind of echo that big interest. But I would really use that time to ask about those opportunities that are there. It doesn't hurt to also ask how has a program evolved. So if you're speaking to someone who is a graduate of that program who is now an attending, they probably have a lot of good insight of how the program looked when they trained there and how it looks now. So that's always something good to ask about, because knowing about an evolution, knowing that a program does change and change for hopefully the better, it's all good information and good things to be asking about.
I always like to ask the people that trained at a spot and stayed there, what made you stay? And the people that moved to the program, so they trained somewhere else, but they moved, what brought you to the program? Because I think that if a trainee decides, I mean, nowhere is perfect, but if a trainee decides to take their skills to their home institution, I mean, there's a million reasons for that. And sometimes the answer is like, my family's here, this is where I can get a job. But I think that if a program is really retaining people, or someone moved all the way across the country to get an opportunity at a certain health system, that kind of speaks bounds. So I think just picking your interviewer's brain as to what brought them to the program can be really insightful.
All right. So the next question is, what are the best ways to stand out during an interview? How do you really make an impression?
You meant a good impression, right, Dr. Eckmeyer?
I was thinking after I answered the question, maybe a good impression is what they're asking, because you don't want to leave a bad impression.
That's accurate. I think there's many good ways to leave a bad impression, but I think the good impression, that people are looking for in interviews is somebody who's attentive, who's prepared, who's engaged, has good questions, body language, all of the things I think that you would just kind of understand. A good impression would be similar to the earlier question, doing some of the background research on the program so that you can dive into the questions a little bit deeper than what you might find on a cursory search online, or you could reach out to the residents. Um, I think, recognizing some strengths of that program and then tailoring your questions maybe to things that you weren't able to find or what you are particularly interested in. All those things really can leave a favorable impression, I think, after the interview is over.
I think a lot of it comes down to polish and preparation and kind of the recognition that at the end of the day, this is a job interview, right? And I'm involved on the faculty interview side as well, and I think the resident interviews that always go the best are the ones where you really feel like you're interviewing almost a junior faculty member. There's a lot of poise, there's a lot of understanding, there's a lot of kind of self-guided and self-directed, good sense of direction of where people want to go. I think that those are the interviews that for me always really stick out. Just a high degree of maturity.
So preparation is key. What is your best advice for not sounding too rehearsed when you are really saying very similar answers in your interviews, possibly back to back to back?
I don't know what you said to the person you were in the room with before. And just remember that. It may seem redundant to you, but it is not redundant to me because it'll be the first time that I'm hearing it for you. And so just always remember that, because it can be tedious and it can get tiring seeing the same thing over and over again. But remember, every interviewer is probably going to have a way of twisting the question to be a little bit different, or may engage or kind of latch on to a different thing that you said in your answer. And that follow-up question will reflect that. So I think that's important to remember. And I think it's one of those, kind of goes back to, how are you going to sell this to a patient or your parents? Don't read it. Don't kind of go word for word about something. Make it yours, make it your own answer, and really show that to us. I think those are always the best. Sometimes, and you may think that, all right, maybe it's not the most poised, the most, professional, but sometimes that truly honest answer about something that sparks a discussion and maybe not what we expected turns out to be the best response we hear and the best conversation that we have. So be honest, be you, because remember, you're trying to learn about us as much as we are to try to learn about you. And you really want to make sure, just as much as we do, that we want to spend this time with you and we want to spend this time teaching you. So those are going to be important things, but don't stress it, because none of us know. We weren't in your prior interview. And the same thing is if you had an interview that went bad, let it go. You're in a new room, start over, be a goldfish, forget about it, kind of move on. You get another opportunity now.
I think if you think about it less as an interview and more as a conversation, that can get rid of some of the stiltedness as well. Because I think the best interviews are conversations and just kind of, sure, you're going to be posed a lot of the same questions over and over and over again, but every person is different and you're going to answer with different words every time. And I was honestly kind of amazed by how many ways different people took what I thought was a fairly rote answer. And you can maybe the meat of it is the same, but the kind of branch off points can get you different places. So I think if you think of it as a conversation starter instead of like, I have to hit all my talking points, it just kind of makes you relax a little bit. And unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, I think sometimes Zoom, if you look really stiff and it's hard to look super relaxed without looking like a slob on Zoom. So just making that, I guess, it's a conversation is what I'm trying to say.
Dr. Ma?
Um, I think we're also, some of the questions may be similar because I think some programs are also looking to make sure that you are who you are and that your answer stays consistent, and that you don't change your answer with every single interviewer. And I think another part is also you don't have to memorize your answer. Like there are certain questions that are going to be asked. So what you should memorize instead are your talking points, like why PM&R? This is why I'm interested in PM&R. This is what attracted me to it. This is why it fits me. And then, but don't memorize the actual answer itself. And just like Dr. Rupert said, you really have to listen to the follow-up questions because the interviewer may be asking a different question, how you answer that question. Um, I, I, it's goal is also to not sound the goal just sound like you. I think everybody has said it multiple times. We want to know you, and we want to know if you would be a great colleague, if you would be a great person that we want to work with. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So many of us feel like we do better in person, myself included, and kind of being in an actual room with people. So how do you transmit that over a Zoom camera?
I think you try to set up your environment to be comfortable to you. Do you have things that you like, pictures you like on the wall? I think there might be a question about like background and kind of how you approach that, but make the environment comfortable for you, because if you're comfortable, then you'll come across as more comfortable and more relaxed. I also feel that I come across better in person. I tend to like fidget a little bit on camera, so I apologize if that's coming through, but like I think that ultimately if you if you are cool in your situation, um, that will make its way to the camera. And I think that, as long as you have all your answers kind of like rehearsed but not memorized, and approach it, I think, as multiple folks have said, as a conversation, that these are stressful. That's very understandable. This is something that you've been trying to do probably for your whole life. It's normal to have nerves, but if you approach it as like, hey, I'm talking to a potential mentor or colleague or attending, that you can start to relax a little bit, and I think that will make it a bit easier.
Definitely. Any other tips for kind of coming across as genuine on camera?
Think logistically, if you can move your own personal picture, you can like pin it at the top of the screen so that it makes it look like you're looking at the camera. I have a bad habit of always looking at my self-talk when I'm on Zooms, um, even when I'm the small picture. So I'll just like put my own little picture up right by my camera and watch myself talk.
You're not alone, Dr. Williams. I think a lot of us do that. So yeah, kind of circling back to your setup and your backgrounds, what's recommended? Normal background, blurry background, virtual background, staged background. What do you think?
I think that I like what Dr. Hall said about being comfortable, and I think Dr. Rupert mentioned like being able to talk about anything in your background. Like I have a Squishmallow Baby Yoda and my laundry hamper here, which I would not have if I was interviewing. But I think being intentional about your space, and if you feel like there's a particular room in the house where you feel super comfortable and the background's not too cluttered, but maybe there's something interesting on the wall, that can be a good conversation starter too if stuff starts to slow down a bit.
Yeah, I would say, and to alleviate anybody's concerns about technical difficulties, I am currently having them. So usually my background is not blurred, but the pictures on my wall I like to speak to. One of them is, from an area that I like in New York City, and one of them has a beaker because I'm one of the weirdos that likes to pipette things. So it was, a broach to talking about my research. And I think somebody actually just asked in the chat, how you talk about your research. There's multiple ways, and we can address that at a different point. But I think that, to me at least, having things that are meaningful to me when the conversation lulls, sometimes it gives the interviewer like, oh, what's that book behind you? Or, oh, what's that picture? And that's a natural way of keeping the conversation going.
Yeah, I would say probably most commonly I see what seems to be like a staged background where they have like, the football from the college football that they played or something, which I think is great. I think if you're in a strange background, like one time I was interviewing someone and I could tell it seemed like different, and she explained that she had just finished at like our conference for PM&R, and so she was still in her hotel room because she was still over there. And so I think if it like I think that's fine if you're in like a little bit of an unusual and private spot. But I think addressing it so the interviewer is not like wondering where you are and distracted by your background is good too.
Yeah, I'll just add for those of you guys that have glasses, I mean, usually it's pretty reflective, so we can see what's on the other side of your laptop also. Like some people, they have like the bright ref ring light, and then you can kind of just see what's on their screen or on the other side. So just be aware of that if you have glasses.
I never thought of that, but now I'm going to be judging myself in my reflective glasses.
My pre-COVID virtual all the time glasses that I just happen to really like and are more comfortable than my other ones. You can see all the glare on them because they didn't do that back then.
In the old days.
It's the old days.
Uh,
But it is true. I will admit, I once asked someone about a poster of fish that was behind them. And this individual knew all about it, and it was all about fishing in his area, and it sparked an entire conversation about, his love of fishing. And it was actually the opening to the interview because there was a big fish behind him, and I couldn't stop looking at it. So, just be willing to speak of it, like everyone has been saying, and think of things that might be distracting. I might ask why your laundry is out. We're going to notice these things. So don't be embarrassed by them if we happen to see it. It's totally okay. Just, be willing and be open. Don't shy away from things. And if there is something, or you happen to have had technical difficulties and now you're in someone else's house or interviewing in another place, like you've already heard, it's definitely okay to say that too, because then you may not know about the picture that's behind you and you may not be able to speak of it.
I think one of the beautiful things about PM&R for us, we're a human specialty that likes to get to know humans, and we have human problems and human things that go wrong and all of that. So I think and hope that the people that you'll be interviewing with will be understanding of all of those things.
I think logistically too, I mean, if you are on a Zoom call for an entire morning or an entire afternoon, be conscientious that the light, if you're using natural light, will shift. And so you might start off with the sun shining over here and then you end up in the dark. So try and pick a space where the lighting will be consistent. I think someone was asking about technology. I personally thought a ring light was really helpful. I feel like a lot of apartments don't have very good overhead lighting, and so having a light right behind your camera is very helpful. And then just seeing what the lighting in a certain space looks like throughout whenever the interview. And it's always I've had people when I've been in the resident rooms for interviews, they changed in between interviews or they were like, "Oh gosh, the lighting looks funny." It's okay to move. Like things your environment changes. And I think acknowledging it instead of just like picking up your camera and going is always a smart move.
And kind of circling back, what if you do have technical difficulties during the interview? How do you handle that with grace?
So we've encountered this on, I'll be honest, both ends, where sometimes the Zoom on the program side glitches. I think we all kind of know that's one of the things to accept with virtual interviewing. I think a lot of times the program coordinator will give you their contact info, and usually they're like preferred way to get in touch with them. So if you fall off the Zoom call and you can't get back in, whether it's text or calling them or whatever it happens to be, I think letting the program coordinator know what's going on is kind of your best bet while trying to get back in as you can. But when it's happened, we've set up a second time to circle around to that interviewer with that student if that's something that was, it happened at the beginning of the interview. We want to make sure that we're getting that time with you. So I think just being flexible. I don't hold the technical issues against somebody when it's something like that. Those are, as much as you try to prepare, there's always just things that happen.
If it does happen on the program end, just you can always do about a 30-second sit and wait patiently. See if your interviewer does come back on. Don't start panicking and leaving the room and things like that. Give us a few seconds to see, maybe there was something, we may come back and that's okay. We will do our best to pick up where we left off if we were interviewing, because we understand how frazzling it is if we're the one who are having technical difficulties. If for some reason we do not come back on or things are still happening, that is another opportunity to reach out to the program and just say you were in, an interview with this particular person and it seems like they froze or they're no longer on the call, and they'll guide you through what to do next. But we will understand, we will, take that into account, and we'll try to continue the interview process as smoothly as we can when we reconnect.
Dr. Ma?
And I will say how you react in this situation can also tell us a lot about you. So I think staying calm, don't panic, don't get upset, um, because I think all of this is actually also part of the interview process. And the fact that you guys got the interview invite tells you that we are interested. So it's going to go okay. There'll be other chances to interview, and the program will make time.
Unrelated, but Dr. Ma's comment made me think of this. I think it's important to recognize that you are being interviewed in some way throughout the entire experience. So your communication with the program coordinator before the interview day is part of it. I think we have a rule with our program where the questions that get asked of the residents at the meet and greet, I don't want to know what's asked there. So that really is you can ask questions that you want to do, but if you're, being unprofessional or something comes up, that will kind of make its way back around. So I think treat the whole day, the days leading up to the day of, and your communication after, that's all part of the interview, right? So I think just take that into account too. So your comment just made me think of that.
I would also add that one, how you handle the stressful situations, you're going to handle stressful situations in residency all the time, and that'll be very telling as to how you may handle those things. And the stressful situations you handle in residency are sometimes life and death. So how you handle how your interview goes, if there's things that happen, can be very telling. And then on the flip side, just if you have a hotspot, make sure it works. Like, sometimes you have to switch to your phone. That is less than ideal, but sometimes it happens. Maybe you have a backup plan. Maybe you have somebody whose apartment you can go to if things don't go well with yours. Just having a couple of things, particularly if you are anxious about technical difficulties, having a couple of backup plans in place. If your Wi-Fi goes out or your electricity stops working or what have you, but ultimately realizing that how you handle all of those stressors is indicative of how you're going to handle stressors when you have real patients on the line.
Okay, we're going to move on to what happens after the interview. Does anybody want to give an overview of that?
So on the residency program side, I guess programs will do it differently, but we meet as a group to go over our individual evaluations and kind of come to a consensus as a group. I think that's what the question is asking. But on the resident side, probably if you're very interested in the program, that shouldn't be the last time you talk to the program. It's good to send a follow-up email. I find it very helpful if you put your picture and your AAMC ID in the email signature because that helps jog the memory. Um, and definitely try to attend any events that might be in person for the program.
Yeah, I agree. We typically try and have the same people across all the interviews, and so once we're done with our final interview day, we'll have our final ranking meeting kind of right away. We like to do all our interviews in December and be done before any holiday break. And typically once we're done with that final ranking meeting there, we don't really touch our list again. There might be a couple of pieces of data that we're waiting for, maybe a test score to come back, or somebody's coming for a visiting clerkship or something that might change things. But otherwise, we're pretty set and let things just go so people don't have to worry about it. We're pretty transparent that after the interview, like we don't do a whole lot of post-interview communication. We leave that to you. If there's further things that you need from us in terms of answering questions, or you forgot to do this, or you went to another program and realized that this thing was there but one didn't know about us. So we're happy to follow up. But we also let people know about that when we're signing off. We don't want any type of non-contact from us to be seen as positive or negative, either way. So we're just pretty transparent with how we handle things after our final interview day.
I think on the whole, PM&R is a pretty small field. So when I interviewed, I think I sent thank you notes or just a quick email with a quick talking point to just about every attending that I talked to. That was ended up being a big time commitment, but I think that it looks good. And you never know where you're going to work. You never know who you're going to work with. And those little things can go a long way. Um, and I think that, yeah, I mean, I had a collection of residents that I rotated with phone numbers, and I texted residents questions all the time. So kind of figuring out who the appropriate audience is for a lot of questions and then just deciding how you want to spend your time. I don't think that everyone sends thank you notes, but that's something that I did.
I think thank you notes do go a long way. It does show that, you had respect for the time for those who, spend time interviewing you, because we do block clinics, stop what we're doing kind of things to make these interviews happen on our end as well. And so sometimes it is a nice touch. It also does show a little bit about you and your interest in the program. One other thing that may happen after the interview process is, if we're uncertain about something or we want to hear a little bit more, we may reach out to one of your letter writers or someone we know spent time with you to get their input. We may also ask if you did a rotation, some of the attendings who spent time with you who may not be part of the interview process, what you were like when you were here, or what kind of student were you, how were your interactions, just to get a little bit of a better sense of you, because through virtual interviews it can be a challenge. So we're going to try to make sure that we're always getting to know you as best as we can.
I would also note, semi-related, but it jogged my memory. Remember that your sub-Is are interviews, and residents will get asked after your interviews about how you did, how you performed with the team, interactions you had with people. So keep that in mind, because that'll also be brought up.
So going back to communication after the interview, are there any rules that programs have to follow about questions communication after the interview or prior to match, or any guidelines that you guys follow?
So just real quick, so from a match violation perspective, you can always tell a program that you're their number one choice. I think there's some good discussion in the chat of you want to only do that to one program, and I think doing it at a time that makes sense, right? If you send it in October, I know that you're probably interviewing at a bunch of places still. So I think timing is one thing. You can't solicit from a program where they might be ranking you. So trying to get that information from like a resident that you know at the program or anything like that isn't a fair ask of a program, nor should a program be asking you the same or pressuring you to put your program somewhere on your list. So I think outside of those things, most other questions are pretty reasonable, fair game. If it starts getting close to something kind of match violation-ish, I think most of us will tell you, hey, this is about all that I can tell you based on that. Or, kind of politely give you a, hey, this is a tree you don't want to bark up kind of thing.
So I think letters of intent were talked about a little bit in the chat. What do programs think about letters of intent? Does it weigh you in any way?
I think the silence speaks volumes. Um, I think I think for me they're nice to receive, right? You always like to hear that you're liked or people like your program as a program director, but I think being transparent, it doesn't really change where I'm putting somebody on my list. So if you send me a number one and I already had you high, I can kind of say, okay, that's probably someone that I'm gonna get if you're at the top of my list and you send me that. So it kind of helps assuage some of my anxieties going into match day sometimes. But I haven't gotten in the habit of changing where somebody's ranked based on whether they send it or not.
There was a specific question about letter of intent. Would it change, would it promote like a review of the application or maybe a secondary review of the application if somebody hasn't received an interview or maybe a rejection initially? Would a letter of intent change your mind?
I'm not
That
gonna I'm not going to speak in absolutes. I think depending on the letter, it might pique an interest. It might lead to a second or third review, but I think I would agree with Dr. Lamb. What's usually we have a rubric that we use to, um, we try to be as holistic and objective and fair as possible when we are sending out interviews. So, that means we're going out of our rubric. I think it there has to be something in that letter of intent that would make us go somewhere else. But I think if you do have a special circumstance, something change, or you won an award or something that would bolster your standing, I do think send the letter. You never know. I think everything is pretty fair game.
Yeah, I'll agree with Dr. Ma. There have been times where somebody sent a letter of intent, and that's changed kind of a feeling of an application. I think a lot of programs I do it. I talked with our transitional year program director as well, where they sometimes will hold a couple application slot or interview slots back for some of those. Hey, I know that, there's a good chance that there's somebody who, might be interested in a program who we haven't given an interview to. And so I think sometimes that particular interest can be helpful. And I think if you reiterate in that why you're really interested in this particular program, or, especially for couples match programs, I think it can be really helpful if, say, your partner has gotten an interview in that city and you haven't, and you're really interested. I think that's another way sometimes to say, hey, I remain really interested in your program. My partner has gotten an interview at such and so hospital. We would really be interested in coming. Let me know if there's any more information I can provide. Those things I think are sometimes helpful. Um, So I think just being proactive, right? It's walking that line between being proactive and being overly kind of hovering over people or pestering, which is a hard line to walk. But I think the really successful ones do it well.
I think following up on the couples match topic, what about the reverse? What if you're couples matching and you get an interview in PM&R, but your partner does not in their program of choice? What advice would you give?
I think depending on how interested you are in the program and your partner having sending a letter to your partner's program of interest what might be helpful. The same way it's going to trigger our interests, it could also trigger their interest. And if both programs are considering to rank them highly, I think it will work out both ways.
Program coordinator might kill me for this answer. Um, but I think this is a time too where, if there was ever a time to kind of reach out to a program coordinator, this might be one of those to try to kind of for two reasons. Number one, the coordinators, at least in my area, all know each other. And number two, it almost gives you a way to kind of test out how your future program coordinator might work and help on your behalf. And so sometimes saying, hey, this is the situation, like what might you recommend that I do and kind of get a little guidance. You can feel out what's that program coordinator do in those. And they have faced this before and will kind of know the best way. If it's have your partner reach out, or if it's, hey, we'll reach out, or if it's, hey, that program really does not like if we reach out or you reach out, they'll kind of let you know that. So that might be one that I would say, but I don't want to speak for all program coordinators. They might not like that.
Okay, we're almost at time, so we probably have one time for one more question. So what about kind of thinking ahead next steps? So timeline, when do interviews typically start going out? When are most of your interview days? Kind of what should people expect in the next couple of months?
Go ahead.
So a lot of programs now will put out transparency statements, not universally, but a lot of times that will be announced, sometimes just through their social media pages. So you will often know when an interview might be coming. And I think in general, programs over the last several years have made an effort to make sure they're really only offering as many interviews as slots available, and things in that way. So I would say typically early mid-October is when you start hearing.
And
Yeah,
then in timeline, I think the bulk of my PM&R interviews were November and December, but also keep in mind that you're going to be interviewing for prelim and transitional year programs, and those interviews go much longer. So just pace yourself and be kind to yourself in terms of timelines. They're very exhausting.
Yeah, I think it's generally accepted like we should give people time to respond to an invitation. So I think one of the more courteous things people do right is not invite more people than you have interview slots for, and give people 2, 3 days to respond. And nobody likes being on a clerkship with a student who's checking their phone 30 times during a visit because they feel this pressure that they need to go respond to an invitation. So I don't think you should worry about that as much. Check when you have a chance, but don't disrupt your clinical care and your clinical learning and things like that. And yeah, I don't think there's too many programs that come out with invitations, within 24 or 48 hours. There might be a few, but most of the programs are going to take time and run their process and do their thing and get the invitations out appropriate to their timeline. And so it's easy for me to say, but try not to stress on those timelines too much. But keep in touch with the community. You might learn when invitations are coming out, or if a program has a transparency statement, that's helpful too.
Okay, we're right at 8 o'clock, so I want to thank our panelists for participating and thank everybody for coming and all the questions and interactions. So appreciate everybody's time and good luck on your interview season.
Bye, everyone. Good luck.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck.
Good luck.